Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Teachers That Sparkle, your place to get those little nuggets of information each week that will help you have those amazing classrooms where kids can thrive and you can feel pretty good about the work that you are doing. All right, guys, I have to tell you, I'm recording this today on October 30th, and it is officially winter in Houston, Texas. I know the calendar does not indicate that it's winter yet, but boy, oh boy, I have to tell you, we went from feel like temperatures yesterday in the 90s to feel like temperatures this morning around 40. I ran yesterday. I had a 6-mile run. I'm in the marathon training season, and it was brutal. It was ugly. It truly was. And today I went out to walk the dog and I had on long sleeves, long pants, my Uggs. I had on a sweatshirt, a jacket, a stocking cap, gloves, and even the dog wanted his sweater on this morning. And I'm talking about my big 85-pound chocolate lab pit bull. He's such a big baby. But anyway, it is cold. It's definitely not something that we're used to here. But I'm not going to say I hate it. I don't like snow. I don't like below freezing temperatures, but I do like this little break a little bit. And I know that my runs this week should be pretty amazing because I don't know, that humidity really gets to me sometimes. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, but we are here to talk about one more great tip to help you have your best classroom ever. And this one is real timely right now because depending upon where you are in the world, you're probably getting to that place into your school year where grades are about to be released, the first set of grades, if they haven't already. So I know places you work on 3-week increments for grades. Some people go with 6 weeks, some people go with 9 weeks, depending upon where you are, of course. But, grades are something that is super important. And actually, in my course From Rookie to Rockstar, I spent quite a bit of time this last month talking about grading because it is so important to, number one, understand why we grade, and then number two, communicate it out. And if you remember from last week, we actually talked about grading, and I just shared a little bit of those thoughts about why we grade our students. And as I promised, now this week we're going to continue with the conversation about grading, and I want to talk to you about communicating grades out to families and students and why that is important. Now, I want you to think about this. Let's just pretend that we're in a class together. I'm your teacher, I'm your coach, and we just keep going through the entire year and nobody tells you how you're doing. If you're making progress, if you're not making progress, are you learning the concepts the way you're supposed to? Maybe you're not, maybe you're totally off, but nobody ever tells you that. I think it would be a little bit frustrating, right? And to even break it down more, let's just pretend we're all on a weight loss journey together. And let's just pretend that you are forbidden from stepping on a scale during this journey. Now, there might be some ways that you would be able to tell if you're losing weight based on how your clothes fit. Maybe you could tell you're getting more energy because you're able to, do things with a little bit more ease, but you're never able to actually be measured on a scale. That, I think, would be a bit frustrating because you're out to accomplish a specific goal, right? And it's the same thing with kids in a classroom. They're in class, and maybe the students might not realize it unless you've done that great job, like we talked about last week, where you're communicating to the students why you grade them, but the parents feel that this is important, right? And as a parent, and my child was in school, I think it's important that we know how the child is progressing. And so having that open communication about grades is very important. And communicating with parents can be a scary, daunting task sometimes, right? Especially if you have those parents that are pretty involved and maybe they question things kind of a lot, it can be hard for you to openly want to sit down with a parent or get on the phone with a parent and really talk about things, especially if things might not be going in the right direction. But as teachers, our duty, our job is to really keep parents informed about that. And even with those more challenging parents, I think the more informed you can keep them, the better. So I'm going to talk to you today about a couple of ways that I use specifically as a teacher, and then when I was a principal, I had my teachers use when it came to communicating about grades. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's not the only way, but the teachers that utilize the system, and I'm learning a lot about systems these days, and I think if you have a system and you utilize the system, then of course you're going to see the most success. And those teachers did. The ones that used the system for communicating, they were the ones that saw the most success. So let's get started. One of the first things that I always did as a teacher after my first year, of course, because I knew nothing my first year, but once I really got into it and started to see success, and then again had my teachers do, is making sure that at the beginning of the year, all of the expectations were set and they were communicated out. And grading is one of those expectations. So when we would do our back to school night, our meet the teacher night, when I would have the first week of communication with any of my families, I always wanted to make sure that they knew exactly how I was going to grade, what I was going to grade, because there was a system, and then how they would know how their child was doing. Now, you have to remember, back when I was in the classroom, we did not have electronic grading systems, so parents didn't get the information right away, but I am going to touch upon that in a moment, because that can be good or bad, right? But what we did on our campus when I was teaching is that we would have folders or agendas or some way to have like a little pocket of things that went home with the students. So any of the communication that we would give them. And we included that every week there would be a specific day that we would choose as a grade level for us to send home any graded papers, anything that we did in class that we took a grade on. And it would be communicated to the parent, this is the grade. If a child failed it and I gave them a chance to have a reteach and a redo, then they would have the second grade listed, very clearly communicated to the parent. And then, of course, if the child was in any kind of special programs, I would also indicate any kind of accommodations that were given to the child. Now, I did all of that work when I was grading the papers and putting the grades into the grade book. So then I would just clip the work together, and then on that specific day, we would pass it out. What we did find is that there were times that kids would throw their papers away and they would not get home. So we had a signature page that went along with it, and it would indicate how many assignments they should be expecting to have come home. Parents knew about this so that they knew if the child came home without anything, that there was some kind of problem, and we got into a system to where the parent then would contact me. It worked really, really well for those daily grades because it kept all of my parents informed about what was going on. But what it didn't do is it didn't do an accumulated grade for them. And I do think that that's one of the pros of having an electronic grading system. So keep that in mind, since now everybody's electronic. That's a pro for you. It does automatically calculate the accumulative grade for the student when you put the work in, as long as you're doing it, in a timely manner, and then parents will know that. One thing that I found that would be a challenge is that because they didn't know the accumulated grade, they might be seeing these papers come in, but they didn't think to put everything together. And there would still be some times for surprises when the actual grading reports would come out. So I did have to do some adoption of that, especially as I became a principal. So we continued that as I moved into administration, and my teachers always did that at all my schools. And the teachers that did that, and then we had a little space on, here's what our accumulative grade is right now. Those were the parents that never called with questions, I promise you. Because the first thing a parent's going to do is call the principal when they have a surprise. Well, there was no surprise. They always knew what was going on. And so that was something that made everybody's life a whole lot easier. The second thing that we always did is we had report card conferences when I was teaching during the first report card release and the third report card release. Why those two? Because we wanted to make sure we were touching base with parents in person. And my principal was pretty tough. She required us to meet with every single parent. And so we had to make sure that that happened. And it was important on that first quarter, just so that the parent understood, especially because sometimes at the beginning of the year, work can be a little bit easier because you're still kind of doing some review, kind of moving into the level of rigor you're going to have for that grade level. And so the grades might look a little different than they might at the third 9-week period. And so again, third 9-week period, it was super important to have that, because that was the time where you knew, uh-oh, this kid is, on track to be going to the next grade level, or maybe we need to be talking about alternative plans. And so we always did those for the first 9 weeks and the third 9 weeks. Now, when I became an administrator in one of the districts, we did that first 9 weeks, third 9 weeks. And then one of the districts, we started with just semester report card conferences, but then they actually took those days away. So I have to tell you, again, following a system, if my teachers made that a priority to have those conversations with parents informally throughout the year, and then sitting down and actually scheduling time to sit down and talk, those were the parents that typically did not come to me with questions, because they were no surprises. They knew exactly what was going on. And I think that we all have to remember sometimes too, even just sending a report card or a progress report or whatever you're calling them home, that paper or seeing it on an electronic screen, and I kid you not, but most parents will not log into those systems. So as the principal, I continue to always send the paper copies home. But even seeing that, sometimes it doesn't register with all parents. So I think that putting that into your system, whether your school does that or not, would be very beneficial to your success as a teacher. You can determine when, if you want to do it the first 9 weeks and the third 9 weeks, first report, not next to the last report, however you break them down, or if you want to do it at semester and then the next time, is more individualized depending on the student's progress. I don't think that really matters as much as the fact that you're having the actual face-to-face conversations. And we can talk later as the podcast continues about ways to really make those conferences comfortable, because those can be very awkward and they can be very uncomfortable for both sides, you as the teacher and as the parent. So we'll have those conversations in the future. But the most important thing to remember right now is actually having the conversations. Okay. And then I always told my teachers, and this was actually policy in 2 of the 3 districts that I worked in as a principal, but I always told my teachers, again, parents don't like surprises. And so anytime a student's grade has dropped, even if it was from an A to a B to a C, but specifically the policy indicated if it dropped to a failing grade, that it was required to have an additional conference. I recommended and really saw the most success with my teachers when they were sure to communicate when there was any kind of drop in a grade, because again, parents don't like surprises. And I think that that's important to remember, because even though it might not seem like a big deal to you, for some parents, it is a big deal. And for those parents that don't think it's a big deal, they're going to actually appreciate just the mere fact that you're continuing to have open communication with them. So I think it is a win-win for everybody. Now, does all of this take time? It absolutely does. But I think one of the big takeaways as we wrap up today, talking about little tips that can help you with communicating grades to families, is that I would definitely recommend that you do not ever do these conferences, these communications through text messages or whatever your school platform is for messaging parents. Even I wouldn't do it through email unless it's a last resort. And I'm going to tell you how I would handle that. I believe that the best way to do these kind of conversations really is in person. Again, does it take time? Yes, it does. But when you put the time in on the front end, you're only going to reap the benefits on the back end. I promise that. My second line would be telephone if needed, but I can tell you that parents can still get distracted on the telephone or a Zoom meeting. I call Zooms kind of like telephone conferences, because so many things are going on. When you have them in front of you in your nice quiet classroom or a conference room at your school, you're going to have the best attention from the parent, right? And how you handle the conversation. Again, we'll talk about it in the future, but that's going to also open it up for parents to be able to have that two-way communication with you as well. I do not recommend emails or text messages ever when it comes to these most important things because of two reasons. Number one, your message is never going to come across the same way you want it to come across. You can't feel tone, right? You can't feel empathy. You can't feel concern. You can't feel in an email or in a text message. And the second reason is because now you have something in writing. And a parent can take that and run with it. Okay. So let me just give you an example. And this is just a totally made up example. I've never had this happen. However, what if you had a parent that was very concerned about grades, over the top concerned, because that can happen. And what if that parent wants you to email every time that you need to have a conversation about grades? And then what if the parent ends up some way having some kind of problem and wants to come in and file a grievance? Now we've got everything in this email. And again, you may not have done anything wrong, but you can't feel tone. You can't feel empathy. So if your emails were constantly only saying, Sherry is failing, this grade went to a failing grade, it never maybe talks about how you're helping her, how you have had communication, and it can become a problem. I just caution against all of that because, again, I've not had this situation ever happen, but I always try to stay one step ahead of problem situations. I just learned that becoming a school principal, and you just never want to put yourself in that kind of position. So again, just to wrap up today, super important to make sure that you communicate your expectations early in the year about how you're going to be grading, what parents can expect to see, how you're going to communicate with them. Number two, make sure that you have had those conferences, set up time, whether your school promotes that or not. It is super important to have those conversations with parents. And again, my suggestions are in person, or last resort, telephone or Zoom, but in person is best because you can get a better feel for everything that's going on. And then finally, make sure that you are communicating when there are any, even just slight changes in grades, because parents are going to appreciate that. And for some, it's going to be very, very important. All right, guys. That is session number 2 with our grading series that I wanted to make sure I talked to you about. Hopefully you got a little something that you can make sure that you use in your classroom. Might not have sparked anything new, but maybe something as a reminder, because so many times those are the best kind of sessions, right? All right. I hope everyone is having a super fantastic Monday so far, and good luck tomorrow. It's Halloween during the school week, and that's always a challenging time. And like I said, I know everybody's weather is kind of being a little wonky. If you're up in Iowa, I know you got some snow this weekend and all of the things. So I think we're feeling it everywhere. Getting ready to go into the holiday season, and I know that that is always a challenge. I do want to share with you, I'm going to put a link in the notes, that if you are somebody that just wants to make sure that during the holiday season, you can continue to stay on your game, that you're able to balance things. I have a new freebie that I'm putting out that will provide you with 5 actionable strategies that can really help you kind of process through all of those seems like unlimited activities that pop up during the holiday season and still stay on target with all of your professional and personal goals, and make sure that you can feel good about the work that you're doing and feel good about spending time with your family. So if that's something you would like, you can always go to that link and you can get that freebie. All right. I hope everyone has a great day, and I will see you next week right here on Teachers That Sparkle.